All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. An absolutely overwhelmingly, magnificently beautiful daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our TALMUD Torah sponsors, for the month of Elul. To thank Shaindy and Avraham Kelman for dedicating all the shiur and drushos this month in honor of Yechiel's engagement to Ilana Falick in the memory of our parents Jerome and Bernice Kelman and Alexander and Friderica David Aleim Shalom. To thank Barak, Maia, Sandy Hoffman, Dora, Lemus, and Avi Melamed for dedicating all the shiur and drushos this month in honor and memory of Reuven ben Emanuel, to thank Ayal Sara Steinberg for dedicating all the shiur and drushos this month, and the zechus of refuah shelema for Shulamis bas Susha, the Daf Yomi Shiur and the zechus of refuah shelema for Yehuda ben Michal. Our day of learning sponsors, Shaindy and Alan Steinmetz, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Sherry's mother, Mrs. Anna Wolf, Chana Riva bas Reb Chaim, who survived the horrors of Auschwitz and built a family committed to Torah, Mitzvos, and devotion to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Brian and Shoshi Panzak, in memory of Freda Panzak, Freda Bas Moshe, and to thank Milt and Melanie Gertner for dedicating the shiur today in memory of Milt's father, Getzel ben Avraham. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families in Nechama, and those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Also with that, let us begin. We have an incredible daf ahead of us today. Actually, what are we doing? The people on YouTube are going to get seasick. All right, so we have an incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Samech Gimel, and we are starting on Samech Beis Amud Beis. A lot to do today. 18 lines down from the top. So again, really incredible Gemara ahead of us. Says the Gemara, Ona Shatamidi Chachamim Emas. How often is the obligation of Talmidei Chachamim for intimacy? Amar Yehuda Mishmome, Erev Shabbos, the Erev Shabbos. Once a week, but specifically on Erev Shabbos. I will say in this context, Erev Shabbos really means Shabbos night. The night of Shabbos to the night of Shabbos. Amar Yehuda, so the Gemara says, where do we see this from? Hasher Piryo Yitain Bi'ito, whose fruits will be given at the appointed time. Amar Yehuda Vitim Rafuna Vitim Rav Nachman, Zamish Shamish Mitaso, May Erev Shabbos, the Erev Shabbos. So the Gemara is actually quite beautiful. The Gemara understands that this pasuk of Asher Piryo Yitain Bi'ito, his fruit will be given in its time, is a reference ultimately again to one who has relations with his wife Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. They both say, again, it's not suggesting that one has to limit their intimacy to that amount, but the concept, we know that intimacy on Shabbos actually, again, is part of the concept of Oneg Shabbos as well, part of the physical enjoyment of Shabbos Kodesh. The Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Yehuda Breit Reb Chia, what's an incredible Gemara. Yehuda Breit Reb Chia, Chasnei Reb Yanai Hava. So Yehuda, the son of Reb Chia, was the son-in-law of Reb Yanai. Hava Azav Yasiv Bebei Rav. He went ahead and he learned in the yeshiva of Rav. The Chol Beishimshi, every Erev Shabbos, he would come back home. The Chi Ahava Asi, and whenever he would come back home, let's listen to this. There would literally be a pillar of fire that was going in front of him. In other words, the Most say that this particular young man, this particular Yehuda Breit Reb Chia, ultimately again was so pious and was so diligent in his learning. He would stay in yeshiva the entire week. He would come home Erev Shabbos, and when he would come home, there'd be a pillar of fire that was literally in front of him. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Yom Achad, one Erev Shabbos, we'll say first of the intermediate wide lines, V'shachti Shmaita. One day, he got a little bit too engrossed in his learning. So we'll say, and what happens? He didn't come home. So the Gemara says something amazing. So therefore people, normally, how did people know that ultimately again, that Yehuda was coming home? Because they would see the pillar of fire. So that particular week they didn't see the pillar of fire. And what happened? So Rabbi Yanai said, Kafo mitaso, turn over his bed. It must be that he passed away. Yehuda kayim lo bital onaso. Because if Yehuda was alive, he would not have neglected coming home for Shabbos and being intimate with his wife. The fact that they did not see the pillar of fire on Erev Shabbos led Rabbi Yanai to say he must have passed away. So the Gemara says, Kishgaga, Havi Kishgaga Shiotzi Mifnei Hashlat. Rabbi say, we've seen this many times, this concept that the words of tzaddikim have an incredible power. And even if their words are not meant in any type of negative way, it has some type of overwhelming effects. Here Rabbi Yanai said, Yehuda must have died. So the Gemara says, Kishgaga Shiotzi Mifnei Hashlat means like a mistake that came out before the messenger, Benach Nafshei, and Yehuda died. So we'll say, obviously, you see a story like this, and there are many lessons. Part of the lesson seems to be kind of in accordance with what we learned yesterday about if one is going to be away from home, how careful one has to be to come back home at their appointed time in order not to cause one's wife any level of tsar. We also see the concept ultimately of the power of the words of a tzaddik. Words have an effect. Words have an impact, and words create realities. Rebbe Iosik le Librei Be Reb Chaim. Rebbe arranged the shidduch for his son with the daughter of Reb Chaim. Kimat lemichtav ksuva. When it was time to write the ksuva, noch nafshei dirabisa. Nebuch, the girl, the kala, passed away. So Rebbe Chas Shalom Psula Ika. So Rebbe said, could it be that the reason this girl passed away is because this shidduch was not meant to be? Because there's some type of psul, some type of disqualification within one of our families. So what happened? So Yasivu va'ainu b'mishpachos. So they went down and each family examined like their family tree. Rebbe Asim Shvatya ben Avital. Rebbe was a descendant of Shvatya ben Avital. We'll say Shvatya ben Avital was one of the sons of David HaMelech. So Rebbe was a direct descendant of David HaMelech. And what happened? Rabbi Chia Asim Shimi Achei David. Rabbi Chia ultimately again came from Shimi, the brother of David HaMelech. So I will say, so this is interesting. So Rebbe took this as a sign that the shidduch was not meant to be. Why? Because being a direct descendant of David HaMelech, so ultimately, again, Rebbe had to be more careful which families he married into. So that's how he took the omen that the Kala passed away. So we'll say, get ready for this story. This is incredible. So they arranged to have Rebbe's son. They arranged another shidduch. Who was the shidduch with? With ultimately the daughter of Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra. Okay, so we'll say, watch this Gemara. So paskule tarti sari shnin l'meisal beirab. So we'll say the way they arranged it was they essentially solidified the shidduch, and they said, okay, the chassan now is going to go off for 12 years to learn in yeshiva. So we'll say, it sounds like a very long time, but Pashtos, they probably finalized it when they were both very young. So again, there was no rush to actually get married, right? No rush to actually. So they said, who's going to go off to yeshiva for 12 years? We'll say, get ready for this. So we'll say, it's clear from the story that before this shidduch was arranged, Chassan and Kala never met. They never met. So Rebbe's son never met Rabbi Yossi's daughter. So what happened? After the shidduch was arranged, what occurred? Get ready for this. Ach refuah kameh. They brought out the Kala to meet the Chassan. Now, ach refuah kameh literally means they passed her by him. So in other words, whatever. He saw the Kala. So we'll say, Amar lahu, nehavu shis shnin. So what does the Chassan say? You know what? Maybe I'll only go to yeshiva for 6 years. Right? It was a good meeting. Maybe I'll only go over to yeshiva for 6 years. So what happened? Ach refuah kameh. They brought out the Kala again. He met the Kala a second time. Amar lahu, ichnis hadar ezos. So what did Rebbe say? He said, you know what? Maybe we should just get married now, and then I'll go to yeshiva. I'll say such a sweet story. So the Gemara says, what happened? Havakamach says me'avua. Rebbe's son was very embarrassed in front of his father, right? Because essentially, what happened over here? What's the Rashi on the story? The Rashi on the story sounds like the Kala was very beautiful, right? The Chassan Rebbe's son sees her; he's eager to marry her. She says, So we went from 12 years in yeshiva, right? 12 years away, and then marriage to why don't we get married now, and then I'll go to yeshiva. So he was embarrassed. Rebbe said, listen to how beautiful this is. Amarlei, b'ni, das koncha yeshbecha. Rebbe says to his son, my son, don't be embarrassed. You are actually acting in a divine manner. The machshava, the way you think, is Hakadosh Baruch Hu thinks. How so? Listen to how beautiful this is. Meikara ksiv, tivi'emo v'sita emo. Rebbe was saying, in Az Yashir, when the Shira describes the building of the Beis HaMikdash, how does the Shira describe the Beis HaMikdash? Tivi'emo, I will bring you to Eretz Yisrael, v'sita emo, and then I will plant you there. That planting represents what? The binyan Beis HaMikdash, the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So first it's I'll bring you, then I'll plant you. Ulevasof ksiv, and what does it say at the end? Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Sirbo said, this is so beautiful. The original plan was the Beis HaMikdash was going to be built upon arrival in Eretz Yisrael. But the Ribono Shel Olam's love for us was so intense that he switched the plans. And what did he do? He built the Mishkan in the desert even before we ever arrived in the Beis HaMikdash. So Rebbe says to his son so beautifully, it's okay. Sometimes when there's love, or in this case, I don't know if it's love or if it's attraction, right? When there's love, we'll say the lashon of Rashi is Ava mekalkel es hashura. Love uproots the natural order of things. It's a beautiful phrase. Rashi says in a couple of different places. Ava mekalkel es hashura. Love disrupts the natural order. So here, this chassan falls in love with this kala, wants to marry her now, he's embarrassed, and Rebbe says, don't be embarrassed. Hakadosh Baruch Hu does the same thing. We're supposed to get into Eretz Yisrael, build the Beis HaMikdash, but Ava Makalkel Es Ashura, love disrupts the natural order of things. He builds the Mishkan in the desert, even before arrival in Eretz Yisrael. So beautiful. So what happened? Azul gets married, Rebbe's son gets married, Azul Yosef Tarti Sarishni Bebeirah. So then Rebbe's son goes off to yeshiva for 12 years. Ad Ga'asa I'akra Divisu. When he came back, his wife was unable to have children. So remember again, it appears that Rebbe went ahead and went off to yeshiva. Rebbe's son went off for 12 uninterrupted years. Now understand, this goes back to yesterday's sugya. How long is a Talmud Chacham allowed to leave for? How long is he allowed to leave for? Again, so if he has his wife's permission, how long can he leave for? As long as he was. So he had his wife's permission. This was the shidduch. He had his wife's permission, and therefore again, halacha l'maisa, he went comes back, she can't have children. Amar Rebbe, heichini avid. So Rebbe's son comes to his father, says, what should we do? So heichini avid, nigarsha, if my son divorces this woman because she can't have children, yomru aniya zu l'shav shimra, how could that be? How can you do that? She waited for him for 12 years to come back from yeshiva. So now what? Because she can't have children, never you're going to divorce her? People are going to say she waited. She waited all that time for him. Ninsev isesa achrisi. Maybe you should marry another woman. You can't do that. Yomru zo ishto vizo zonaso. People will say, the one who he can have children with, that's his wife. And this other woman who he can't have children with, who was his first wife, is going to be his harlot. And I will say, just so you should know, Rashi in Bereshis makes reference to this practice. That it used to be very common that a man, at least biblically, that a man would marry two women. One of them he would give like a sterility potion. I don't know if potion is the wrong word. Sterility medication. Why? That was his intimacy wife. That was his intimacy wife. He didn't want her to get pregnant. So that was his intimacy wife. And then he would have another wife, or what we call a procreation wife. So Rebbe was concerned that if his son goes in and marries another woman, then it doesn't look right. So I will say, so what happened? So boya leirachami ve'istais. So this is incredible. So what happened? Rebbe davened for her, and she was healed. So we'll say, what's the kash on the story? Why don't you start with that? In other words, I will say it's very simple. Because in somchen alanes, we don't rely on miracles. In other words, we'll say this is actually a Gemara like this is a very profound Gemara, because what the Gemara is showing us is Rebbe faced the problem. So I will say, so sometimes people think, it's fascinating. You ask a Jew, what do you do in a time of crisis? What do you do in a time of crisis? And what do people say? What do you do in a time of crisis? Daven. No. I mean, yes, but no. In other words, I will say, what you do in a time of crisis is you roll your sleeves up and you figure out, how could I address this situation? Now, that doesn't preclude you from simultaneously davening to Hashem. But the first stop in a moment of crisis is not, Ribono Shel Olam, help me out. The first stop on the journey to crisis resolution is rolling up my sleeves and figuring out, what can I do to help myself? What can I do to extricate myself from these circumstances? What could I do to alleviate or to at least ameliorate this situation that I'm currently dealing with? After you've exhausted all of your hishtadlus possibilities, then you have the right to say, Ribono Shel Olam, you got this. Right? In other words, like I have tried. I have tried. So to be clear, you could always daven to Hashem, and you could concurrently daven to Hashem as you're putting in your hishtadlus. But I can't tell you, so often in life, people encounter problems, and what they do is they abdicate, right? They just give it to God, and that's not right. That's not right. You don't give it to God at first. You first try to solve your own problems, and then if you can't, ultimately, again, that's where Hakadosh Baruch Hu steps in such a profound Gemara. Let's go back there. Rabbi Chanina ben Chachinoi, Havaka Azul Beirav, B'Shili Hilu Rav Shimon Echad. We'll say it's crazy Gemaras. Rabbi Chananya, crazy good. Chananya ben Chachinoi was going to yeshiva. He's going to yeshiva, right? So he was traveling on his way to yeshiva. What happened? So B'Shili Hilu Rav Shimon Echad, and I will say he stops into town, and it was the wedding of Rashbi. So first of all, I just want to point out, you have to just imagine this generation, right? Where you have all of these tzaddikim. Now here they're young. So Rabbi Chananya ben Chachinoi, right, is going off to yeshiva. He's on his way to learn in the yeshiva of Rav. He stops off in town, right? Stops by Rabbi Shimon and sees, he stops in town, it's Rabbi Shimon Yochai's wedding. Rabbi Shimon Yochai sees him. Amrlei, I'akiv ad asi b'hadach. Rashbi says, wait for me until the end of Shabbat Brachos, and I'm going to come with you to yeshiva. So I'll say, get ready for this. So lo akvale. So Rabbi Chananya said, no, sorry, can't do. Not waiting for you. Okay, he goes off to yeshiva. Also trey sari shani bebei Rav. So Rabbi Chananya goes in, and we're going to talk about why he didn't wait in just a little bit. Also Yosef trey sari shani bebei Rav. He learns 12 years in the yeshiva of Rav. Ad the Asi, so we'll say now he comes back home. The Ishtani Shvili Demasa. So we'll say, so apparently Rabbi Chananya ben Chachinoi, when he left, was already married. He was already married, right? And it sounds like maybe he even had a family, we'll see. Right? He was already married. So now he's away for 12 years. He comes back home. What's the problem? Comes back to his town. They changed the streets. Right, they passed a new infrastructure bill, right? And Baruch Hashem, they were able to pave new roads. And suddenly, again, he doesn't know the way back to his house. So this is incredible. Azul Yosef Aguda Dinara. So he goes to the riverbank. Now, we'll say, why does he go to the riverbank? If you ever wanted good gossip in Talmudic times, right? Where do you go? The riverbank. Because what happens at the riverbank? What happens at the riverbank? People do laundry, people draw water, right? There's a lot of stuff going on over there. So he goes not looking for gossip, but he figures, let me go to the riverbank. So he goes to the riverbank. So Shama lahu rabisa da havukari la bas chachinoi mali kol seich v'tanaza. So what does he hear by the riverbank? He hears someone calling to a young girl, Dora of chachinoi, fill up your bucket and let's go. And let's go. And I remember again, I will say, this is Rabbi Chananya ben Chachinoi. So he hears literally someone calling out to a girl, Bas Chachinoi. So the Gemara says, Amar Shmamina, Hai Rabbi Sadidan. He says, this must be one of ours. Now again, he doesn't know who this girl is, but Lamai said they're calling her Bas Chachinoi. So the Gemara goes, just listen to this. Azal Basra. He follows her home. He follows the little girl home. So what happened? It was incredible. Hava Yasivu Divisu. So but Kana Allah Kimcha. So Rabbi Chananya ben Chachinoi's wife was sitting and sifting flour. Dol Eina Chazise. She looks up, and who does she see? Her husband, who she hasn't seen for 12 years. Sabe Liba Parach Rucha. It was too much for her to handle, and she passed away. In other words, she died. She died of shock. So I will say, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So the Gemara is Amar Lefanov. So we'll say, poor Rabbi Chananya poor Mrs. Rabbi Chananya ben Chachinoi. Now Rabbi Chananya ben Chachinoi comes home, and he says, Amar Lefanov, Ribono Shalom, Aniyozu Zeschara. So I will say, it's so powerful. Rabbi Chananya says, my wife was most nefesh from my learning. And now I'm finally home. This is the reward that she gets. So the Gemara said, Boy Rachami Allah L'chaya. He davened for her, and she came back to life. Incredible story. We'll say one more story. More than one more story, but one more story in this vein. Rabbi Chama bar Bisa Azul Yasa Trei Sari Shani B'Bei Midrasha. Soon Rabbi Chama bar Bisa. I will say, by the way, I'll just point out that Maharsha says, why are all of these stories 12 years? There must be something to the 12. So the Maharsha says something very interesting. The Maharsha says that often what happened in situations is people got married at 12, or shidduchim were arranged, at 18, shmona esrei l'chuppah, they'd get married at 18, and then what? Go off to yeshiva for 12 years and come back home and kind of resume a normal life at 30. At 30, that's often the schedule. Okay, anyway. Rabbi Chaim ultimately was 12 years in yeshiva. Ki asa amar loi abed kida abed ben chachinoi. So listen to this. So people heard about this Rabbi Hanani ben Chachinoi story. So what happened? So it became like a good musar that when you come home, don't just show up. Right? Don't just say. By the way, there's a halacha. It's a different. When you walk into even your own home, you're supposed to knock before you go in. Now you don't have to knock and wait for someone to open the door. But the idea is, because depending on your family dynamic, you may be outside for a while, right? But l'maisa, what it means is that halacha l'maisa, a person can't walk in unannounced. Right? Even if it's just you and your wife, you have to knock on the door first. You have to knock on the door. So let's say, part of that is tznius, and part of that is just the kavod habrios. Don't startle people. So the Gemara says as follows. So Rabbi Chaim also sat in yeshiva for 12 years, and he said, you know what? I'm not going to pull what they call the chachinoi. Right? What's a chachinoi? Chachinoi is surprise. Right? In other words, they're not going to pull a surprise. So instead, what happened? Ayal Yosef b'midrasha. Shalach l'beisei. So instead of what happens? When Rabbi Chaim Babisa comes home, he goes to the local base medrash. He sits and learns, and he sends word to his house that he's home. Right? So good plan. Learn the base medrash, send a messenger home just to let my wife know that I'm home. That way again, she knows that I'm coming. Fine. So let's say, get ready for this. Asar of Oshia Berei, Yosef Kameh. So let's listen to this. Who walks into the base medrash? Reb Oshia, who was Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa's son. And I will say, when Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa left, Reb Oshia was a baby. So father doesn't recognize son doesn't recognize his father. So what happens? Yosef Kameh, Hava Kamash Leishmaito, and Rabbi Oshia engaged Rabbi Chama in learning. He was asking questions in learning. Chaza, the Kamas Chadadei Shmaisei. So Rabbi Chama saw that this young man, Oshia, was very sharp, a very learned young man. Chalash daite. Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa became depressed. Why? Amar, Ihavi hacha havili zera. So let's listen to this. He said, you know what? If only I was home to raise my son, I would have had a son like this. See, he lamented the fact that he was not present in his child's life. He's like, who knows what my kid is? My kid is probably doing whatever. Right? If only I was someone who could have raised a son like this. So let's listen to this. Ki hai ola beise. When now Rabbi Chaim Bar Bisa comes into his house. So listen to this. Al berei. After he comes in, who comes in? His son, Rabbi Oshia. Kamei. So ultimately, again, Rabbi Chama stood up for this young Talmud Chacham. He figured the young man was coming to ask him more halachic questions. Amralei. So Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa's wife said to him, is there such a thing as a father who gets up in front of his son? So essentially I will say such a profound Gemara. So Rabbi Chama's wife is saying, that's your son. Oshia, that young man you were impressed with, that's your son. So I will say it's so beautiful. Kari Ali Rabbi Bar Chama said about this, Hakut hamashulash lo b'meheri yinotek. We will say, as Shlomo HaMelech writes in Koheles, the 3-ply cord, chut hamashulash, a 3-ply cord, in other words, a rope that is made of 3 strands, shall not be quickly unraveled. So I will say, what does this mean? So this means that if in a family you have 3 generations of Talmidei Chachamim, we've seen this before, that is a skula, that Torah will never depart that family. So we'll say, in this moment, Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa ultimately felt that this pasuk was mukuyim, was fulfilled in his family. Why? Ze'oshio b'noshel Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa. Because Rabbi said you had Bisa, who was a Talmud Chacham, his son Rabbi Chama was a Talmud Chacham, and now his son Rabbi Oshio was a Talmud Chacham. Rabbi say, What's the pshat? Like, what's fascinating about this Gemara? So remember, all of these stories are incredible, I will say, but they're here for some type of import. So I will say, I think that there's a profound message in this story, which is that if you think about it, Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa was not present for the raising of his child. Was not present for the raising of his child. So how do you reconcile that? Like, in other words, how did his son become so great with an absent father? Because I will say, I think what the Gemara is teaching us is that when a person applies themselves to Talmud Torah, and a person applies themselves, the Chofetz Chaim talks about this, with those who give themselves over to tzarchei tzibor. A person gives themselves over to communal needs, and sometimes for communal needs and for Torah, that means you don't spend as much time with your family. So a person might think, well, if I'm involved in communal needs, if I'm involved in Torah, and I'm not a present parent, so my children will suffer for that. So again, what the Gemara is teaching us is, if you take care of the Ribono Shel Olam's children, he will take care of yours. If at the end of the day, you apply yourself to Torah, you're in the base medrash. I will say, not just learning yourself, but Rabbi Chaim Bar Bisa also was a teacher. You're teaching others, you're spreading Torah to others, right? You're involved in tzarchei tzibor, helping others. Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, you take care of mine, I will take care of yours. They're both saying, of course we have to be present parents. And of course we have to be an ongoing influence in our children's life. But lest you think that what you give to the klal comes at the expense of your children, the Gemara Reb Chaim Bar Bisa teaches us that is not the case. Incredible Gemara. I will say, Rabbi Akiva. David Schwartz could not sleep the whole night last night because of Rabbi Akiva. I will say, here we go. Rabbi Akiva. Rayit the Kalba ben Kalba Savua Haba. Rabbi Akiva was the shepherd ultimately, again, of Kalba Savua. But I will say, it's interesting. In Maseches Tainis, it says his name is Kalba Savua. Here, it calls him Ben Kalba Savua. Okay, I will say, either way, we know that this is not his real name. Kalba Savua means satiated dog, right? Not a popular child's name. So I will say, so what does it mean? The Gemara Maseches Tainis explains that he was one of the wealthiest men of Yerushalayim, and he was so wealthy, that even if you came into his home, right, as ravenous as a dog, he would feed you. So again, Rabbi Akiva was his shepherd. Rabbi Akiva was a shepherd. So Chazye Barte Dahavitzania Umali. So what is incredible? So Kalba Savua's daughter saw in this shepherd Akiva that he was tzania. Tzania means modest, and mali. Mali Rabose means milus. He had good milus, good character traits. I will say, it's interesting to point out that Tosfos has a whole discussion over here about the fact that in Gemara Maseches Pesachim, Rabbi Akiva comes across as a little bit of a ruffian. But if we have time, we'll come back to that. We'll leave that on the side. So what happened? So Amrle, so she says to him, so she says to him, now remember again, she sees in him midos. What doesn't he have? A shred of Torah knowledge. The guy, Rabbi Akiva, is not Rabbi Akiva, he's Akiva the shepherd. Akiva the shepherd is an absolute ignoramus. So she says to him, tell me, if I marry you, will you go to yeshiva? Amr Lei'in. He said yes. And I will say, why shouldn't he say yes? Right? Why shouldn't he? He said yes. I will say, I just want to point out something absolutely amazing. What did the daughter of Kalba Savua see in Rabbi Akiva? What did she see in Akiva? Midos. See, I will say, you could acquire knowledge. You could acquire a lot of different things in life. You could acquire money, you could acquire a career. The one thing that is the most important thing to look for within a match, within a shidduch, is midos. Because midos often, as much as you could acquire midos, and as much as you could change midos often are something that either you have it or you don't have it. Again, it doesn't mean you can't acquire it. But if you have it, so she sees in this young man a shepherd, nevertheless, right? A shepherd, nonetheless. A shepherd, and he has such exquisite midos. She says, where there are midos, here I will say, what did she see? Where there are midos tovos, that's where there is the foundation to build a beautiful spiritual edifice. If you have midos tovos, you could build anything out of yourself. So she sees this man with exceptional midos. She says, okay, go to yeshiva. So what happens? They get married privately, right, secretly. Why do they get married secretly? As you're going to see in just a moment. Vishadarte, and she sends him off to yeshiva. Why do they get married privately? Shama avua afka, right? Shama avua. Kabbalah Savo hears about this. So I'll say, and to put it mildly, like, he blows a gasket, right? Literally, again, he loses it. He loses it. Afka mibese, he throws his daughter, her name was Rachel. He throws his daughter Rachel out of the house, Adrana menechase, and he makes a neder, precluding her from getting any benefit from his wealth. So now Rachel is homeless and penniless. And Rabbi Akiva is off in yeshiva. So what happened? Azal Yosef Trei Sarishnin Bebei Rav. Ultimately, again, she goes off, right? He goes and he spends 12 years in yeshiva. Ki asa, Aisi Be'adei Trei Sari Alfi Talmidei. When he comes back with 12,000 Talmidim. Shamelahu Saba, Dika Amarla. So I'll say, so Rabbi Akiva comes back to town. As he's coming back in, he overhears an old man speaking to Rachel. So Shamelahu Saba, Dika Amarla, Ad Kama, top of Samach Gimel, Ka Midabras Amanos Chaim. So the old man says to Rachel, how long are you going to continue to live like literally, again, a living widow or a widow of the living? Rachel's a young woman, I will say. She's a young woman. And pretty much, she got married and her husband went off. So for 12 years, I want to point out, she's penniless and she's homeless. I will say, the Medrash points out, you know how Rachel made a living? She was a cleaning lady. I will say. So just understand what this means. This was a daughter of one of the wealthiest, most prestigious families in Yerushalayim. And she was now cleaning other people's homes in order to enable her husband to become the best version of himself. Absolutely. Now, by the way, do not use that, right, in any way, right, in any marital discussions, right? Let's say, but I'm just pointing out, it's absolutely amazing. So people begin to talk with me, and I remember again, the other piece that the Medrash highlights is, people thought that when Akiva went off to yeshiva, he went off to yeshiva. In other words, they figured, why did this guy marry her? Why did he marry her? For money. Now she has no money, right? She has no money. It's a backfire. So where's Akiva? He's off somewhere. So the Medrash relates that for years they were telling her, move on with your life. He's not coming back. So here this old man tells her, go ahead, right? How long will you be living with her? Amrlei, Rose is incredible. If my husband will listen to me, Yosef Trei Sari Shani Achrini. He would stay in yeshiva for another 12 years. Amr, Rabbi Akiva overhears, Rabbi Akiva is back in town. He has not spoken to his wife, not seen his wife. He overheard this conversation. Amr, Bershus Ka'avidna. I obviously have her Reshus for another 12 years. Hadir Azov Yosef Trei Sari Shani Achrini. Let me go back and learn for another 12 years. So Bebe Rav. So we'll say, so ultimately, Ki Asa Aisa Ba'adei Esrin V'arba Alfi Talmidei. So we'll say, he goes back for another 12 years. We'll discuss it just a moment. Goes back for another 12 years. And I will say, what happens? He comes back now 24 years later, 24 years after his marriage, and ultimately again with 24,000 Talmidim. Shama Devisu Hava Kanaf Gislape. His wife heard, Rachel heard that her husband was back in town. She ran out to meet him. Amra Luhu Shivivta She'ili Mani Livush V'ichsai. So Rachel had tattered clothing. So the neighbor said to Rachel, borrow a nice dress. Get dressed nicely to greet your husband. As I will say, it's such a heartbreaking story. Amr Luhu, she said to Yodea Tzadik Nefesh Behemto. Literally, again, the Tzadik knows the soul of his animal, which means the Tzadik knows what I've been through for him. The tattered clothing is a testament to the Mesiras Nefesh that I have endured to allow him to go from Akiva, the ignorant shepherd, to Rabbi Akiva, the Gadol Hadar. It's a heartbreaking story. When she comes before him, she falls on her face and she kisses his feet. See, you have to. It's such a dramatic Gemara. She hasn't seen her husband in 24 years. And the last time she saw him, he took leave of the house and he was just an ignorant shepherd. And now he's come back. And at the end of the day, he's Rabbi Akiva, the Gadol Hadar. She's so overwhelmed by who her husband has become that literally she just falls at his feet. She kisses his foot. So they began to push. They thought she was. Nobody knew who she was. At least I shouldn't say nobody knew. The Talmidim did not know who this woman was. So ultimately, again, they began to push her away. Rabbi Akiva said the most beautiful phrase. Amar lahu shavkua, leave her alone. Shali v'shalachem shelahi. At the end of the day, at the end, Rabbi Akiva says to the Talmidim, do you know who this woman is? Do you know who she is? Shali, everything that is mine. V'shelachem, by extension, everything that is yours. Shelahi. All because of her. Everything that I am, Rabbi Akiva says, and everything that all of you are, my Talmidim, is only because of her. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Shama avua da asa gavra rabba lamasa. So Kalba Savua heard that a great man had come to this city. Amar ezel legabe afshar de mefer nidroi. Shows this is just wild. So Kalba Savua says, there's a great man in the city. Maybe he'll help me to annul my vow. I both say, which vow? Which vow? Right? The vow precluding his daughter and her ignorant husband from going in and getting any benefit from his property. I just want to point out, how long has the Neder been in effect for? How long has it been in effect for? 24 years. Kaba Savua. What the heck are you waiting for? It's not a direct quote, but just right? 24 years. I will say, how many times does it happen in family dynamics? That families get angry, right? Relatives get angry at each other, and what happens? They allow the cycle of animosity to perpetuate itself for years. Often people have even forgotten what they're angry about. I don't even know what I'm angry. I just don't know that I don't like you. And the cycle, by the way, family, friends, the cycle goes on. Kalba Savua, your daughter is living as a cleaning lady, probably just a few mere steps away from you, and it took you 24 years to think about, maybe I should annul the vow and give my wife. Yeah, because you know what, Kalba Savua probably had that righteous indignation. My daughter, she married this guy, this ignorant shepherd. How dare she? Doesn't know who they doesn't she know who they are? He gets angry and allows the anger. So what happens with anger? You just allow it to fester. And when anger festers, all it does is consume you more and more and more, to the point that you just become an angrier person who can't even get out of your own way. Well, at least to Kalba Savua's credit, he wakes up 24 years later. Let me go, maybe this guy will know my vow. Amrle, so Asla Gabe comes before Rabbi Akiva, and I both say, Kalba Savua has no idea that Rabbi Akiva is his son-in-law. He has no idea. So Amrle, Adaita de Gavra Rabba Mikanadris. So listen to this. Rabbi Akiva says, Kalba Savua, tell me, if you knew that your son-in-law had become a great man, would you have made the neder? So Kalba Savua says, great man, Amrle afilu perek echan afilu alocha achas. Even had I known that my son-in-law would learn one Mishnah, one pasuk, I would have never made the neder. Amrale anahu. So Rabbi Akiva said, by the way, it's me, Akiva, your ignorant shepherd. It's me, Akiva, your ignorant shepherd. So the Gemara says, Nafal alapei v'nashke al karei. So Kalba Savua fell down at his feet, kissed his feet, and ultimately again gave him half of his wealth. Incredible, half of his wealth. I just want to point out, half of your wealth doesn't make up for ignoring your daughter for 24 years. I just want to point out, all of your wealth doesn't make up for ignoring your daughter for 24. It's nice. It's the money. Money's always nice. Money always helps. But money does not make up for familial strife. Incredible Gemara. So the Gemara says, Barati, so we'll say, before we go on, the famous kasha, we'll say, and I printed it out for myself last night, and then I forgot to go ahead and print. Oh, I have the scan. So I will say, I just want to read you something amazing. We don't have time for it, but I'm going to make time for it, because whatever, we've already blown the schedule as it is. So I will say, listen to this. I will say, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, zechus Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the Sichos Musar, ask the obvious question. It says, Rabbi Akiva comes back after 12 years, and what happens? He overhears his wife talking that if it was out to you, go for another 12 years. Beautiful. Stop at home for a coffee in Danish, right? A little something, a frappuccino, right? Say hello. Say I'm alive and well. How are you? No, he hears it. He overhears the conversation, and he turns around and goes the other way. Asks Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, why couldn't you just stop? Rabosai, I just want to read this to you. Listen to what Reb Chaim Shmulevitz said. He said, quotes the Gemara, He quotes the Gemara and says, good. Mipnei Shabi Akiva lo nichnas l'beis. Right? Shabi Akiva was, so listen to this. He comes back. I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, all right, let me just read it to you. It's like this. Mipnei Shabi Akiva im haya nichnas l'beiso. Rabbi will say, this is the famous Reb Chaim Shulamis. Because he understood that if he went into his home, haya mafsik rega be'emtza, haya lomid shtei mesrei shana, va'od shtei mesrei shana. So Reb Chaim Shulamis says there's a difference between learning 24 years and learning 12 years and 12 years. Had he gone into his home, there would have been a break in his learning. And when there is a break in your learning, I will say what? It's not the same level of intensity. See, when Rabbi Akiva comes back after 24 years, he has learned 24 years uninterrupted. How do you acquire 24,000 Talmidim? How do you become Rabbi Akiva the Gadol? I will say, obviously, this is Rabbi Akiva. How do you become Rabbi Akiva Gadol Ador? Ritzifos. Ritzifos means the concept of doing things in an uninterrupted fashion. Essentially, Chaim Shulamis says, 12 plus 12 doesn't equal 24. 12 plus 12 is 12 and 12. Could you accomplish a lot from 2 blocks of 12-year learning? Absolutely. But are 2 blocks of 12-year learning the same thing as 24 years of uninterrupted learning? Absolutely not. A Rabbi Akiva only becomes a Rabbi Akiva because of an intensity and a ritzifos of uninterrupted learning. There's something to devoting yourself in an uninterrupted fashion without any distraction. I will say, obviously, this is an extreme. This is not the norm for regular people. But Lamaisa, if you want to understand how great people become great, there's a singular, laser-like dedication and devotion to whatever it is that they have to accomplish at hand. That's where greatness comes from. I will say also, we can emulate this, I will say, in a little bit of a fashion, because if you notice, a lot of times when we learn, we're distracted, right? I'm 5 minutes here, then on here, then over here, I will say, it's an interesting exercise for our own selves to establish a seder of ritzifos, to commit to saying, you know what, I learned for a certain amount of time uninterrupted. By the way, it could be 10 minutes, right? For 10 minutes, I don't look at anything else other than my Gemara. For 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever amount of time you want it is, but learn without distraction. Because when you learn with distraction, whatever distraction will be talking to your friend, distraction will be looking on your phone, distraction will be counting ceiling tiles. Reb Chaim Shulamis says 45 minutes of learning, but multiple distractions is not 45 minutes of learning. What it is it's 7 minutes of learning, plus 11 minutes of learning, plus another 9 minutes, which is beautiful and wonderful, but the intensity is not there. Intensity is only created by a sense of ritzifos. To be ratzif means continuous, uninterrupted learning. That's the muster, says Reb Chaim Shulamis. 12 plus 12 doesn't equal 24. Only 24 is 24. 12 plus 12 is what? It's 2 units of 12, which is fantastic and beautiful, but does not have the same effect of 24 uninterrupted years. But that's the most haskell for us, to try to establish in our ruchnius a sense of ritzifos, however long it's going to be. Every person has to know their own limitations, but to create for myself a model where I go ahead and I commit myself to something in an uninterrupted fashion. I'm fully vested in this. Ritzifos. So Chaim Shulamis, beautiful. So the Gemara goes weiter. So much to do here, but the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, what happened? The daughter of Rabbi Akiva did this same model with her husband Ben Azai. Right? In other words, Ben Azai went off to learn in yeshiva for a protracted amount of time as well. The Ainu Dharma Inshi is what people say, Rechela bas Rechela azla. The sheep follows the sheep. Ki uvde ima, kach uvde bart. Like the mother did, so did the daughter did. I will say, Tosa says the whole discussion over here about Ben Azai, because different Gemaras that say that Ben Azai himself never married. Nafshi chashka batorah. Okay, we'll get to it in the next cycle. Rav Yosef, Breid Rava, Shadre avuila beirav. We'll say great story. Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, his father sent him, Rava sent his son Rav Yosef to yeshiva. So the Gemara is the Kamed Rav Yosef. The Kamed Rav Yosef. I'm sorry, the Kamed Rav Yosef. Paskule Shis Shani. So I'll say, so what happened? They established that he was going to spend 6 years in yeshiva. Ki hava tlas shani, at the end of 3 years, so Rav Yosef ultimately again decided, Mati mali yom kippuri, amar ezel v'achzinu le'inshti beisi. 3 years went by, Erev Yom Kippur came, so you know what, let me go see what my family's doing. After 3 years, so Rav Yosef Shamavua, Rava heard that his son was coming back from yeshiva, shakal mana, he took like a knife, a weapon, v'nafik la'pei, and he went out to greet him. Now greet him is not exactly the correct term. He went out to confront him. Amar le, zonascha niskarta, igeda armi amar le yonascha niskarta. Why are you coming home? Why are you coming home? Right? You're supposed to be learning in yeshiva, 6 years in yeshiva, that's what you're supposed to be. Now again, I will say this, he engaged him with some pretty strong words. In other words, what he was accusing him of essentially was, oh, you miss your wife. You miss your wife, right? You want physical intimacy, that's why you're coming home. So I will say Rava was upset at his son. He expected more from his son to be able, I will say, it's the retzifos. It's again, because 3 and 3 don't equal 6. Only 6 equals 6. So he was upset that his son was breaking the rhythm, breaking the retzifos. So I will say, listen to this. Itrud, they got into it with each other, father and son. Lo mar ifsik v'lo mar ifsik. And I will say, they argued mamish all the way up until Yom Kippur, to the point that neither of them had the time to have the Suda Hamafsekes. So I will say, so, first of all, okay, not the best way to spend your Erev Yom Kippur arguing with your kid, right? But Lamaisa also same idea. What was Rava so upset about? Well, what's the big deal? His son wants to go, maybe he did miss his wife, but he wants to come home to check on her and say, what is the big deal? He's going to come home and go back. No, because once you break the rhythm, once you break the ritzifos, then at the end of the day, it's very nice. You have 3 years and 3 years. But you do not have 6 years of collective spiritual growth. Incredible. Rabbi says in the Mishnah, Hamoredes abayla, pochsin lo miksuvasa. Rabbi say literally translated, a woman rebels against her husband. Now we don't know what does that mean, rebels against? First of all, Lashon itself is so strong. What is she's rebelling against her husband? Okay, we'll see. What's the halacha? Pochsin lo miksuvasa. We diminish her ksuva. We diminish her ksuva as a result of her quote-unquote rebellious behavior. How much do we go ahead and diminish it? Shiva dinar b'Shabbos. 7 dinar in a week. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shiva trapikin. 7 trapikin. We'll see what that means in the Gemara. And Masio Poches, so we'll say how long, in other words, how much of the ksuva do you diminish? Ad keneged ksuvasa. Well, you could diminish the ksuva up until the value of the ksuva itself. Rabbi Yossi says, the olamu poches v'holech, What's this pretty amazing? Rabbi Yossi says, no, you could continue to diminish the ksuva until what? Until you go into the negative, until the point that the wife owes the husband money. Now I will say, when would the wife owe the husband money? If she happens to have other property or inherits property, she would end up owing him money based on the negative balance. Rabbi Yossi says the olamu poches v'olech achim tibol efrat. The Gemara says, "Go v'chein moder al ishto." So if a man rebels against his wife. Again, we don't know what parents does against Mosifin al ksuvasa shlosh dinar b'Shabbos. In that case, we add on to her ksuva 3 dinar in a Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda omer shlosha trapik, and Rabbi Yehuda says 3 tropics. Now, I will say, now why is it exactly that the amounts are not equal for men and women? Right? If a woman rebels, so to speak, it's a diminution of 7 dinar in a week. If a man rebels, it's an addition of 3 dinar in a week. We'll see in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, moredes mimai. What does it mean that she's rebelling? Rebelling against what? Rav Huna says intimacy. She's refusing to be intimate with her husband. I will say, we're going to clarify this later, but I'm going to clarify it now because it's important. This is not a case, right? We're talking about over here a case where she says she's using intimacy as a tool of revenge against her husband. That's what's happening over here. It's not the pshat that she doesn't feel well, or we'll see cases where she says, Nima salai, I find my husband physically repulsive. Right? That's a different kind. We'll talk about that case. This is a situation where she's clearly using intimacy as a tool of revenge. So the Gemara says, it means that she refuses to work. So the Gemara says, all right, let's analyze this. So the Mishnah also said there's a case of a man rebelling against his wife. So according to the opinion that says that rebellion means a refusal to engage in intimacy, I understand that could go both ways. But according to the one who says from work, is a husband obligated to work for his wife? To which the Gemara says, You can have a case, the Gemara says, of where he says what? I'm not supporting you. Right? I'm sorry, I'm not feeding you, I'm not supporting you. What about the case Rav says, in a case where a husband says, I'm not feeding you, I'm not supporting you, the halacha is Yotze, V'yitain ksuva, you have to divorce her and give her a ksuva immediately because that's not a sustainable marriage. That's true, but Lamaisa, again, there's some conversation that goes on. In other words, Rabbi say that just because the husband says that, so Lamaisa, again, we don't immediately go ahead and just divorce her. In other words, halacha Lamaisa, there's still a process by which we begin to diminish the ksuva. So the Gemara goes, Vaiter Meisvei, Achas liarusa unusua, vafilu nida, vafilu chola, vafilu shomeres yavam. So we'll say, so listen to this. The Gemara quotes the Brisa. The Brisa says, whether she's in arusa unusua, a nida, a chola, a shomeres yavam, in all of these cases, the halacha of moredes applies. So bishlam lamanda amar mimelacha shapir. So what's according to the opinion that says that moredes means she refuses to work, I understand that applies to all of these cases. So nida bas tashrishi. So we'll say, but according to the opinion that says moredes is tashmish, is intimacy, is a woman who's a nida, right? Is she able to engage in intimacy? So we'll say, like we saw in yesterday's daf. So we'll say, even a nida could be a moredes. Because if a nida says to her husband, I just want you to know, I am refusing to have intimacy with you, refusing to be intimate with you. Even though right there in that moment, they're not allowed to be intimate, a husband knows that he's going to be able to be intimate with his wife after she goes to the mikvah. The fact that she's saying now to him, right, no intimacy for you, ultimately is a form of moredes. So the Gemara says, Ikeda Amri, others say, Bishlam Mandar Tashmish, Hainu Diktani Chola. So I understand, according to the opinion that says moredes is Tashmish, that's why it includes the case of chola. Because even when a woman is a chola, she has the ability to be intimate with her husband. Amud Beis Ella. Lamant Amr Malacha. Chola Bas Malachi. But I will say, according to the opinion that says that it's Malacha, is a woman who is able to work. Ella. We'll say, here we go. Mitashmish Kuli Amalo Pligi de Hagi Moredes. So we'll say, everyone agrees that when a wife refuses to be intimate with her husband, I will say, again, we're going to discuss the parameters. I will say, again, I want to be clear. This doesn't mean, right, you could have a situation where a husband desires intimacy and a wife says, I don't. That doesn't make her a moredes. Just to be very clear. Moredes is a very specific case where a wife is refusing to go ahead and be intimate with her husband, and you could see it's being done in a punitive type of fashion. Again, we'll discuss the parameters of that. So everyone agrees that if she withholds intimacy as a punitive measure, that's called moredes. So keep pligi, mimalacha. We'll say, where does the machlokes come up? If she refuses to work. Mar savra mimalacha lo havi moredes. One opinion says that if she refuses to work, that's not called moredes. Maybe it's not nice. It's not nice. In other words, if she's able to work, able to help, or when we say work also means like the domestic responsibilities that we've spoken about before. So one opinion says, it's not nice, but it's not moredes. The other opinion says, no, even from malacha, that's called moredes also. So Rabbi say, the Gemara has reached a very important conclusion, that halacha l'maisa, refusal for intimacy as a punitive measure is moredes. That everyone seems to agree with. And halacha l'maisa, refusal to work, right, to do malacha, that's a machlokes if it's moredes. Incredible. Let's go back to just for the 2 minutes we have. Gufa, hamoredes abayla pochsin lo miksuvasa shiva dinarim b'shabbos. So Rabbi said we learned there's a Mishnah, right? A woman rebels against his husband. Here it's a Brisa, but it's the same thing as the Mishnah. A woman rebels against her husband. We diminish her ksuva 7 dinarin a week. Rabbi Yehuda says shiva trapekin, 7 trapiks. Rabbi Sinu chazru v'nimnu. Rabbi said the rabbis came along and they said they employed a different model. What's their different model? Shiu machrizin ala arba shabasos zuach arzu. So Rabbi said it's actually very interesting. We announce about her in shul. We announce about her in public, right? Rachel is a moredes against her husband Reuven. It's just part of the announcements before Kiddush, right? Kiddush is sponsored by the Schwartz family, and Rachel is a moredes, right? So what happens? She machrizin ala arba shabasos. So I will say, ultimately, again, they would announce about her for 4 weeks. So I will say, by the way, I just want to point out, just so you know, we are equal opportunity announcers. In other words, when the Chazal said that we announce about a moredes, remember again, the Mishnah already told us, mored goes both ways, right? A wife could rebel against her husband, a husband could rebel against his wife. Either way, the point over here is, beforehand, the old model used to be, we'll diminish the ksuva if she's the moredes, or we'll increase the ksuva if he's the mored. Then the model changed. The model changed with, instead of a gradual diminution, we will engage in this for 4 weeks. We'll apply communal pressure for 4 weeks. Beis Din would send to her. Again, I will say, whatever applies to her also applies to him. Shochem Beis Din, Havi Yodas, Shafilu Ksuva Seich Me'amana Hifsadata. And Beis Din sends her, just know, even if you have a very valuable ksuva, you're going to lose it. Achos, listen, the Gemara says, Achos liarusa nusua afilu nida bafilu chola bafilu shemaris yavam. Shabbos says, so ultimately, again, it doesn't matter what her state is. If she's a moredes, with 4 weeks we announce about her, Beis Din sends her announcement, just not at the end of 4 weeks, you don't change your ways, you're going to lose your ksuva, no matter how valuable it is. Even if she's a nida, but a nida is not able to be intimate with her husband, again, I will say one more time, Amrlei, I will say once again, you can't compare someone who has bread in his basket to someone who doesn't have bread in his basket. The idea being that even a nida who is not capable of engaging in relations now, if she's clearly using relations as a punitive measure against her husband, she becomes a moredes. So the Gemara says, all right, so we'll stop. Well, let's just finish this up. When we make the announcement, where do we make the announcement? We make the announcement in shuls and in batei medrash. I will say, so we make this in public. How do we know this? Why do we say it for Shabbosos? Because we say make it on Shabbos when people are gathered in the batei medrash and the batei kinesios shmamina. Indeed, see, Shabbos said this is the second iteration of this mored. That's all. We'll stop over here for today. More on this in Eretz Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach. Everyone on Zoom, everyone have a great day. Good to see everyone. Incredible daf.
How are you? Shocks me the most with the story. He's built on his meetings. That's good enough, right? Look what happened to him. Was whole thing was basically
which probably makes it. Probably that's why your lack of needles was so severe. In other words, the fact that they had a Rebbe whose whole life was midos. You had a Rebbe and you did not learn.
So there didn't have to be that critical, it's just because of that. That should have gotten.
Yeah, I think it highlights it. Yeah.
The other thing that bothers me about the story is that and these rabbis who go away for any period of time, what about all their obligations of mizonos, of ona?
So remember again, it's yesterday's daf that a wife can be mochel.
Oh, so you just have to assume that
well, no, you have to ask. You have to ask. That's what I'm saying.
No, but in these stories, we're assuming that that's the case.
Absolutely.